All right. All right. So shall I dive right in, Rich?
Yeah, dive right in.
Okay, great. So first, I'm honored to get to present on Esri Story Maps today. I think many of you are probably familiar with the concept of story maps, but you might not have ever made one. So my goals today, of course, are to give you the confidence to make one on your own, and also tell you more about what they are, show you some great examples, walk through some common cases where you'd use a story map, but then also some unorthodox ones, and answer any questions that you have. So one thing, it's a different way to share information, and I really think that story maps hits that sweet spot between a live presentation and a web artifact. Because, I mean, you can watch a video of someone presenting, and that's one kind of interactive way to consume information and share information. But a story map is something that a person can look at in their own time, scroll through on their own, interact with, but still be guided. So there's, it's interactive. You can embed video, you can embed photos, websites, maps, and really control when information is exposed to the end user and tell a story without having to actually be there and hold their hand. Or you can use it in concert with a presentation. So, so I think it's a really neat tool. Also, just a note to another ESIP plug, I think this idea of communicating science and using, I guess, all the goodness that technology has for communicating science, it's a focus that ESIP is training folks up on, and I'm part of the ESIP Science Communication Cluster, so we're always thinking of different tools and resources for communicating and telling our data stories. So,
hey, Christine, just one thing I think is, can you move your mic just a little bit further away from
my head?
Yeah, is that possible? Just, or we're getting a little
bit
of
pretty loud.
Yeah, we're getting a little bit of undesired sound.
Okay, is that better?
Sounds better. Yeah.
Okay.
And what is at Chris Eggwhite mean? Is that your good?
That is my that is my social media handle, but it's my 2017 goal is to participate better in social media. So we're trying. My maiden name was Eggers, so Chris Eggwhite. So I had a PowerPoint all ready to go to walk through this, and then I decided that it might be better to actually use a story map to talk about story maps. So what you're seeing here is our map series template, and I'm going to walk through our story map story using this template. And so just getting started right off the top, first I want to show you some really neat examples of story maps. So this is a gallery that Esri curates of some of the story maps that folks have shared with us or that Esri has created. And the links to all these things I'm going to show you are on a different slide later here. But there's a number of really great examples. And so I'm going to show you three that I really like. First, this one, this opioid epidemic one. This is a fairly new story map that we've put out. And it's integrating video, obviously, as you go through. You scroll down. This is with a template called the Cascade template. We've embedded some charts here talking about the number of deaths from prescription drugs. There's some places where we're talking about the mapping of opioid prescriptions and embedding this really beautiful map. And then as we navigate down, the story map is controlling how we are introduced to the map, showing blue areas representing places where the claims are higher, and orange areas where there's a lower than average percentage of prescription claims. We're navigating down and we're zooming in to places in the map, continuing to navigate down and navigate around. So the idea is with this Cascade template of story maps, you can, the user can explore around too, but as you're scrolling down, and I'm scrolling down on the web browser, but these are all responsive apps. So of course they work on a mobile device as well. And the mobile device, of course, you're often scrolling down. You are experiencing this story. So it goes on, and it's quite a powerful story, actually. This map has been shared in many different venues and different folks interested in telling the story and investigating some of this opioid problem in our country. So that's one example. Another example I wanted to show, of course, is very large art. If you know me, I love art. And what I like about this example, again, it's using our Cascade template, is that they've embedded, I'm going to scroll through to where we're actually moving into a 3D realm. They're embedding imagery. I think this is where it gets into some of our web scenes. And I don't know how this is coming across in the webcast, but we're actually seeing some 3D navigation of some of these very cool large art things in our world. So the StoryMap is controlling, and I'm just scrolling down through the browser here. The StoryMap is controlling the story as I scroll down, and they've embedded this 3D capability. So that's cool.
So this kind of this choreographed sort of aspect of like the 3D map and stuff, that's all plugged in?
Yep. So that's part of this Cascade template, that you can bring in those web scenes and put in the place where the pop-up comes up. You can time that as the person scrolls through. And there is a lot of documentation on how to customize this or just use the builders. So another thing I should have said at the very beginning before I started showing these things is these templates, they actually have, they're hosted in ArcGIS online, but you can also download them and host them yourself. So, and the ones that you download and host, they're open source templates. Of course, the idea is if you're using the ArcGIS online, you can really connect to these maps and some of these web scenes and bring them in. And there's these builder kind of wizards that make it very easy to plug in your photos, your videos, your web scenes, your maps, your content, upload a photo, and I'll show that towards the end. But these builders are very easy to use. I can't even explain how easy it is to get started. You find one you like, you launch the builder, and then you're off to the races plugging in content. And it really takes, I mean, very little technical knowledge actually. A final example that's really nice is this climate migrants. So they don't all look like this scroll down experience, but these are some of the nice newest ones. That's why I'm showing them. But and another point is, even though they're called story maps, you don't have to use a map. You can build a complete presentation and not integrate a map if you don't want to. It's more a way to map out your story. Although, of course, I work at Esri, and I would love if you use maps. I think that maps are a great storytelling component. So you can go to the gallery and look around at different examples. I also, before we get into the technical how to build these and how to get started, I wanted to show one more thing, and that's kind of a more unorthodox uses for these maps. So there's a nice blog post about 12 things you didn't know you could do with story maps. This blog post I'll give you the link to. But I'll show you, I'm going to close these guys. I'll show you some of these unorthodox ones. One, you could do your company's annual report as a story map. So this is a real example from the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society. If you load this up, there's actually some sound. They've integrated sound clips too in the story map. And a user can, and this is a different template than the other ones I was showing you. But so here we have the letter from the executive director. We go through, can read all about that. We go to the next one. They're showing their map of membership. It's a really different way to do an annual report. And we're seeing different end organizations think outside the box for how they're delivering content, because people actually will read and interact with the annual report better this way than when it's a PDF. Another example that's really good is using it as an instructional tool. So here's one on the motion of tectonic plates, and this is teaching people about tectonic plates. So it starts with the video that I'm not going to play, but you can see they've embedded that here as they scroll through. Then they've got a map with the plates. People can interact with that and learn more. There's directive text here that's educational, and really you could just hand this off and say, read through the map, read through the story map, read through the story, learn about tectonic plates. And it's more interactive than maybe watching a PowerPoint on it or reading a document. You're actually able to explore with it. And then another kind of unorthodox way to use these is actually in a presentation like I'm doing right now. This presentation, like I said, it was a PowerPoint. I put it in this map series format, and now I'm able to walk through it in a more interactive way. So the technology part of the story map is not, like I was saying earlier, it's not really very difficult, and you'll see that when I do the demo. It's more, I think the challenge more is in thinking through your story and organizing your content. And Esri's put out a number of documentation tools that we've tried to make nice and easy to read to help you organize that. So we have a blog post out, well, actually a website, the 5 Principles of Effective Storytelling, like you've got here. Basic things, connecting with your audience, of course. You need to think about your audience, think about the arc of your story, starting your story with a nice image at the beginning and a nice title. These are pretty common things when you're thinking of storytelling, but sometimes we rush to the technical and we don't storyboard things out and think about what's the best way to say this, what's the way that will get people to open this tab, how do we make it clear that that we want a user to do this in the story map, and then simplify, 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 cutting that all down so it's a very clear interaction. So I've mentioned there's a number of user app templates that you can interact with, and I'll show you more about that. That's another part of choosing the right mechanism to tell your story. We've seen this cascade example that I showed for our first 3 examples, but that might not be appropriate for your annual report. Your annual report, you might want to have a different format. Or if you're doing a story about visiting, say, campsites in your national park, you might want to choose a different template that really highlights each campsite and shows an overview map instead of a cascade scrolling type story. So it's really about choosing the best experience, and we have some tools to help you do that too. Make your maps if you want to make maps, or just upload your content, and striving for simplicity. So nice principles, and we have a number of blogs that talk about what to do, what not to do, how to take your story map to the next level, little things that make the increase the usability or make them easy to discover, this type of thing. We have literally probably, I don't know, dozens of blogs on improving your story maps because they're so popular. So let's get into how to do this. Of course, there's a story map for how to do this. And again, I'll have my link for how to do this. I have a tab that has the actual resources. But you just, like I said, you start with getting ideas and mapping those out. You're going to choose a template, follow instructions. So this all goes into some of the details about where these things are stored. Some folks often ask, what do I need to download to make a story map? You don't really need to download anything. They're hosted in ArcGIS. Of course, like I said earlier, you can download the templates and host them on your own web server and infrastructure if you'd like, or on a cloud server, or wherever you'd want to host it. I also mentioned, oh, were you going to say something, Rich?
Just a quick question. Does that mean that the story map is then exclusively consuming services, or I mean, like you had a shapefile or something? Or are you going to get into that?
Well, I think you'll see I can upload files to my story map, and then they're stored. If it's an ArcGIS line, they're stored as content there. But if I'm hosting it on my own server infrastructure, you could, link to a local resource and embed it somewhere in your web application. I don't know if that's hitting the question that you have.
Well, I guess I was just wondering whether like if it was a shapefile, if you uploaded the shapefile, would that information actually live in your story map, or would it actually get turned into services that are being consumed by the story map? But maybe that's anyway. It doesn't matter. Let's keep on going.
That is a good question. That is a very good question, and there's an answer. So the story map itself isn't going to do like a transformation on your, on any kind of data that you're putting into it. ArcGIS Online has mechanisms for uploading a shapefile and converting it into a feature service that you can style and consume in your story map if you want. So if you wanted to upload a shapefile to ArcGIS Online and make a feature service, you could do that and then link to it in your story map.
Right. Okay.
That would be the way you do that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the story map itself is kind of more like a web, kind of like a website tool. It's not going to do that automatic processing.
Okay. So yeah, it's going to reference local files then on the on the website in effect. Mm-hmm. Okay, got it. Okay, right. Thank you.
Right, or services, right. Like you can absolutely reference web services too.
Right.
As you see on web pages, and I've uploaded some images here as well that we'll get to.
Yep.
So really the point of this tab is just to show you that there's a nice walkthrough for how you get started, and then once you've got a story map, people use them all the time for promoting their work, telling their stories, and that's the final step. It's not really a technical step. So let's get to the app templates part. So when you are getting started, there will be this, what kind of story do you want to tell? And they'll say, get started right away or browse the apps. Let's just say we're going to browse the apps. So this is a page, this isn't an exhaustive list, but this is showing some of the different templates. So they have a tour format, which, and they kind of try to give you an idea of which template would best fit your story. So of course, if you're going to do a tour, this might be one to check out. You can see other examples of the tour by clicking on the gallery. There's a tutorial for how to get started with it, or you can just click this button and it'll launch the builder, and you can actually start to make one. So that's a nice feature on this page. Not all of them have builders, but the ones that say build do. And I'll show you what that looks like. StoryMap Journal is a different format, so it's more of a, you're going to have a side panel. That annual report example I showed was StoryMap Journal. Cascade, of course, that's our one of our latest and most popular ones because it's a very image-centric. So it talks about if you're going to be doing 3D scenes, images, videos, this is a really great one. And so on and so forth. So you can look through here, look at examples, get started with a tutorial, and you're off to the races. And I mentioned that these are customizable, and also that the templates are downloadable, and these are open source. So we have this library for the StoryMap examples, and you can just go to GitHub and grab it. And there's also some examples in here, and as all GitHub stuff, some introduction, well, ideally, if they've made a README file, some introduction and instructions for how to get started. So, and really the instructions are going to be different depending on which one you're using, but for the most part, there's a nice FAQ on tips for each kind. So, also, there's, go ahead, Rich.
Well, I was just going to say, so the idea there would be that you could browse all those things that people have contributed, maybe grab one, adapt. Do you see something that's similar to what you want? You go grab it and modify it?
Yes, yes. And so another thing, and I'll just skip to it here. So there's actually also this, this is where all those links that I said, oh, I'm going to show you the links later. This is an image that I uploaded on my map series story map here that has all the links. This Developers Corner is a site where people are sharing tips on working with the different developer StoryMap resources, like here's my CSS that I used for this one that really gave me this great look and feel, or here's a tip for doing a pop-up that's different. You know, this type of community, it's all in the StoryMap Developers Corner. So you can really dig into those different templates and share what you're doing that's interesting, or look at what other people are doing, depending on the template that you're working with. So you can download them from here. I can show you the Developers Corner. I actually should have bookmarked this, but let's see if I can just, let's not do it that way. I'm trying to I'm going to launch this in a minute here. Let's see. Developers Corner. I don't know what it was off the top of my head. Developers Corner.storymaps.archives.com. Corner.storymaps.archives.com. Okay. Okay. So this is a site that shows you different ways you can get resources. So we're still having our developer summit in Palm Springs right now, and there's a number of presentations that are going on there about story maps, and those you'll be able to also see after our developer summit. There's a number of specific, hey, here's how you code and customize these particular applications that get into some wonderfully nerdy latest information. But you can see there's a lot of different ideas that people have shared here. So there's this developer community that you can also participate with that's very popular. And they have best practices, quick tips, beginner, and intermediate, advanced. You can see what different level that you want to engage at. So I want to point out this page as well. So there are, this is going to be a resource page that if you're getting started with learning how to make one, that's that link that I had earlier, the 5 principles, I talked through that. Some of these tips on success. There's a lot of resources here, frequently asked questions, community, blog. There's this great newsletter that has great examples and contests on make a story map and win money, win fame, win glory. You can sign up and get that information. And then a place for, if you are a developer, where you're going to be able to get all this information. So one thing I'm just going to show, so how would I want to show you that builder interface for what this looks like. So one question people have is, you need to have an ArcGIS Online account to work with story maps. You don't need one. Like I showed, you can download them from GitHub as well and work with them, use the tips from the Developers Corner, interact that way. If you do have an ArcGIS Online account, if you can get started even with a free account or your organization account. A lot of folks at ESIP have ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS available to them. And so you log into your organization. And that's probably the easiest way to access some of the builders. So let's pretend I've just logged in. It's as easy as going to add an item. Well, actually, I'm going to create an item. I'm going to create an app using a template. And then I can go ahead and build. And then I've got all these different story map templates to work with. These are the default ones, but I think they're probably the best way to get started. And then make one of these, and then you may get a good feel for how you'd want to customize it or what you'd want to do that's different than what's in the template. So I had chosen this, which one was it? That map series one. Which one is in the, yeah, story map series. And then you just click web app, create web app, or you can download it locally and work with it in your development environment. So if you create the web app, it's going to ask you to make a title, tag, etc. Done, click done, and then it's going to launch the interface. One thing, so I'm going to jump to this interface. This is the story map that I've been navigating through. This one, well, so here's the actual, I'm viewing the story map, but if I launch it in that edit mode, you'll see the story is private. If I actually reload it, I think it's going to tell me it's checking the story map, so it's checking to see if my URLs are active, if there's any problems with the story map, and if there is any problems, it'll let me know. How I would create content, I can go to, this particular one has these different bullets that are walking you through content that I'm adding in. If I wanted to add another page, say I wanted to add like an image I could upload or do Flickr, Google, whatever I want to do, live link to something else that's not one of these. Video, of course, there's some different video options. Web page, which is how I did these first few bullets in my story, or I can do a map. Now, I've got a map up my sleeve that I thought might be of interest, this ESIP Summer Meeting U.S. Travelers map. I can do some different configurations here. I'm going to accept the default, click Add, and I've got my map that I have created. I've created this map and shared it in ArcGIS Online, but I'm just ingesting it in my StoryMap, and it's showing me the different people that traveled in the U.S. to the ESIP Summer Meeting that was in Durham, that I've made the star here, and it's dynamically changing. I've got this hotspots filter on it, but it dynamically shows the hotspots of where people were coming from for that summer meeting. We see lots of people coming from Denver, some folks from the LA area, lots of people from DC. And if I wanted to drill in, and maybe the story I want to tell with this map is there a relationship between the location of the summer meeting and how far people travel? From my not statistical analysis, I could say maybe, maybe not. Nice relationship between Washington, D.C. and here, but that's not uncommon with the federal contingent of ESIP. Or I could do some statistics, and maybe that's the story that I want to tell. But it's very easy, and if I wanted to kind of build out the pane on the left-hand side with content, I can copy and paste my text in here, save, and now if I refresh my story, should have my new, checking my, no issues detected, and now I've got this little pane here. So that was pretty easy, and I'm just using the builder interface, and I can continue to edit it, and then when I'm ready to share it, instead of it being private, I would just click share, and I can choose if I want it to be public to the world, private to the organization that my ArcGIS Online is associated with, or just private so only myself can see it. So that's some of the easiest ways to get started with the story maps.
Christine?
Yeah.
Are you you might cover this, I guess, but what kind of interaction can you have in those maps? So far, I think we've just seen the zoom and pan kind of, but are there other things that you can do? Like, I don't know, measure or, some of the other stuff that we saw in like Web App Builder?
Yeah, yes you can. So it just depends on how this map is configured.
Oh, okay.
So I'm actually thinking that, maybe some of that kind of comes down to how you're working with it in ArcGIS Online, or if you're using like another type of map on the web. However that thing is configured, that story map can consume those controls. So, so I think the heart of your question is, could I consume a Web App Builder app in here? And the answer is yes. So you would just embed the, you could have the link to your Web App Builder in here and then interact with that map just as you would with any app that you're building in Web App Builder. This particular one's pretty simple just because it's a simple map that I made and saved in ArcGIS Online. But some of the more complex interactions, it just depends on how complex that thing on the other side is that you've created.
Mm-hmm. But you do it through adding a web page, not adding an app, not adding a map, and then like, and adding extra stuff to it. You either add a map or you add a web page. Right. Yeah, exactly. So the thing that you're authoring on the other side and you're consuming in your story map, that's where you're going to build in most of that complex functionality. There are some things with the timing, like I was showing with the cascade. Let's see if I can go to the cascade. So let's just go ahead and build a cascade one. Let's see, ESIP IT and I cascade. You have to just fill this stuff out. Done. So it's taking that template and building it out. It's got this kind of default starting situation, but you add your own image or video. Here I don't think there's, oh yeah, you can browse for the images too. Like I think I downloaded some from our ESIP summer meeting.
and then you can work through the builder to do the different settings. So, I mean, here we've got, if you want to have bookmarks, you create sections and can do them. So, admittedly, I'm kind of a novice at using this template. So the details about the zooming in and things I probably won't be able to go into here. But really, the idea is that it's pretty easy to get started, and the more you dig into them, the more you can customize and make them what you need to make them for telling your story.
I just want to let people know that, like, I've got everybody muted. If you want to ask a question, maybe you could just chat it, just because we have 40 people. So yeah, just put something in the chat, and then I can either unmute you or ask the question to Christine. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, that's it. So it's pretty much my goal here, just to give you an overview, to let you know it's pretty easy to get started. There's a lot of tools to use. I'm not a developer, and I'm able to create these things pretty easily. I know that last summer, Annie Burgess created a nice ESIP story map that showed where different ESIP members were, and she was able to do that pretty easily. And so I hope that you give it a try, and there's a lot of resources for you to use. So that's kind of the introduction that I had, and I'm happy to answer questions at this point.
All right, great, thank you. That was awesome. I'm going to actually unmute everybody now. All right, so you should be able to. Everybody should be unmuted, unless you've muted yourself. You should be unmuted now if you want to ask Christine any questions. At least I hope. People unmuted.
Okay, I think I saw one about, is it possible to easily transfer content from one template to another without starting from scratch? So this is a requirement that comes up often. I think you can create copies of things, but not from really one template to another. I don't think there's translation tools. So, I mean, ideally, you could say, here's all my content, kind of like WordPress, right? That's not a capability that is currently supported, but I think we've heard that quite a bit. So
do you mean
later on down the road?
So do you mean if you saved your, so those things are out on GitHub, those are just the configuration but without the content? Or, I mean, if you were referencing services, that would all just work, wouldn't it? Wouldn't it still just work?
Right, so if you're referencing services, that works, but I think and correct me if I'm not understanding the question, if you build a story map with one template, is there some kind of tool where you can say, oh, I'm going to, I tried Cascade and it didn't fit my needs. I want to, click a button and see what it looks like in the story map journal format.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So there's not right now. There's not tools for that. But you're right. The content that if you're referencing services, that content still lives. But I don't think there's anything that converts it to a different template to see what it looks like. And I think a lot of that's because the templates are, we try to get at that at the start with what story are you trying to tell. Here's some examples of what might be a good idea to tell that story and get ahead of it that way, so you're making those decisions at the outset and forcing you to kind of organize your content and think about your end vision.
Okay. Do you see we have a couple more questions in the chat there, Christine?
Can the user interact with the, oops, yes. Are there any, for goodness sake, don't do this in regard to, yes, there are. So let's see, that's a great question. So if you go to the, let's see, the resource page, which wasn't on here, and I will say my story map here is probably not the most beautiful story map, of course, it's not at all. But I'm going to this thing. Where's the blogs? There was a great blog that was 10 mistakes people make in making a story map. So we can do 10 mistakes in story maps, ArcGIS, or just mistakes, right? So there's we have a good blog. Let's see. There's tips for creating a great story map. But then I think there's also, which one was it? If you go to the Esri blogs, blogs. There's a whole story map contingency, and in there they have, hey, best ideas, mistakes we commonly see. One mistake we commonly see is just not documenting. Of course, it comes down to metadata often. Just not documenting your story map. So I did an example of what not to do when I took the title and pasted it into the tags and pasted it in the description. The more information you can do on the metadata for your story map, the better it is when you're actually, when someone goes to discover it. So let's see, story maps. I'm going to see if I can find that article on the do's and don'ts searches. But yeah, definitely that's one thing. The other is some of the story maps we're making them all responsive, but if you go off the reservation, of course, and doing your own customizations, it might not look good in all browsers on all devices. So that's another thing, is people don't test sometimes. Yeah, there we go. 12 days of story map tips. That's a good one. I mean, you can see there's a lot of different things in here. But yeah, the not testing on the devices, not testing in the browsers, not including the metadata. Also including links that, you know, there's nothing like a broken link. But it's pretty much the typical web stuff. As far as I know, oh, another thing is that sharing part I said, where like my story map here is private, and I'll probably make it pretty and then share it, and you can embed it in the ITNI webpage instead of my slides. But the sharing thing, if you're ingesting like I'm ingesting that ESIP map of the attendees for the summer meeting, I'm ingesting that, but I haven't shared that map publicly. And say I share my story publicly, and someone gets to that part of my story and they try to look at that map, if I haven't shared that map publicly, they're not going to be able to see it. So it's kind of making sure the permissions across the board are consistent. So if you're sharing it publicly, make sure all the things you're ingesting are shared publicly. That's a pretty common mistake people make too. Okay. This question, select, identify, draw, add, layer. They can definitely identify. It really depends on what you've embedded. So this is this question, can a user interact with the maps? It really depends on what you've enabled in your story map. This kind of gets to your question earlier, Rich. If you've got a link in your story map to some web app builder type app that is enabling a lot of functionality, then you can interact with it that way. A lot of the maps, for example, in my example here, I have enabled pop-ups. So if I click on this, I'm seeing, you know, this is a person, I made it a little bit anonymous here. You know, I can go in, I can click on the different attendees and see, but, and that's a pop-up, right? But that's because on my underlying map, I've enabled pop-ups. It's not anything I did in the StoryMap template to do that.
Right. So whatever you do on your web page, you can do. I mean, you're just basically embedding it in another web page, right? So, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And sorry, I was laughing at the nice blog that you found here. Glorious mistakes to avoid.
Is that the one you were thinking of? No.
That was not, because I was thinking of there's a similar one with from Esri, but I'm sure this is. I'm curious to see what the glorious mistakes are here.
Yeah, I didn't look actually.
Yeah, hopefully they're glorious enough, and yeah. But
all right. Does anybody else have a question. I know that after the presentation on Web App Builder last week, one of our guys here, was able to just go off and create, in fact, Zafir, who's on the line here, he was able to just go, create a couple of apps, create an app, and then he went ahead and created a story map, even without, it didn't have to read a lot, didn't have to study a lot to be able to do this, and you've just shown us how easy it is, so that's pretty cool.
And that is really my desire. So, if we wanted to do, even like we could do at the summer meeting, we could be happy to do like a deep dive story map. We're going to code it all out. I'm not that person, but I'm happy to bring that person in. I think the goal is just to show you how easy it is, and to answer that question about, well, what do I need to get started? And I put off using story maps as a communication mechanism because in the back of my mind I thought, oh, it's not as easy as putting together this PowerPoint. And it literally was easier than putting together a PowerPoint. And the nice thing is it's a little bit more interactive. It's a lot more interactive, and it's a lot more, I think it's a lot more fun.
Well, that's when you really know the technology is working, right? When it can make your own job easier.
Yeah. And it also makes you ask those questions like, what am I trying to say? It's not as easy as, oh, I'll just recycle that presentation someone else did, and add my own things to it. How am I going to guide the user through this this message? So. Right. Not that anybody ever recycles content or anything, but yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Well, for the USGS folks on the line, we all have access to. You have to sign up for your username _ USGS account, and then you're off to the races. So anybody, like you said, Christine, there's probably other organizations who also have sort of a site license.
Yep. Right. And you don't, and also like I said earlier, you can absolutely, you saw the GitHub site, you can download them and post them on your own infrastructure, or create, I think, a trial account or a personal account and interact, do it that way too. Another question here, any new and exciting features coming up? Actually, we just had a whole slew of new things come out. I think it was March 1st. So let's see, is it going to be, which one? Oh, yes, what's new in StoryMaps, but it's going to be 2017. So StoryMaps 2017 is the blog post. One is that newsletter that I talked about, which I think I can probably show you that too on the resources page. That's a new thing, but I'm looking here to see if I can find that blog right off the top, because I was looking at it just the other day. Might just click this one and
looks like you lost your internet or something.
I know.
But you're still talking to us, so I guess not.
Of course it's live demo here. March 2017. So here we go. So and the first thing I talk about is that newsletter. But they also go through. So those Cascade templates I was showing at the beginning, those were in beta for a while, and now they're not in beta, which pretty much doesn't mean much to most folks, except that they're now fully supported, and you can call our technical support and get help with them. A lot more robust experience there. And they talk through some different things, like in that Cascade, and I was doing this the other day. I was kind of trying to choose how I was going to go through this presentation. You can upload these images, and much like our social media experience, it'll dynamically size the images and make a nice tiling perspective. There's some ideas too that if you define a theme for one story map, you can save that and use it across other story maps. So it doesn't get totally to the heart of the question about translating from one template to another, but at least you can have a similar branding across your story maps. Then there's other things in here. I can paste this in the chat for you all here. And it goes through the different templates for what's new. So those were the new things in the Cascade, but there's new things in the StoryMap journal and the map series, which is the one that I was showing you. So what's on the horizon, can't speak to that because we literally are talking about that this week at our Dev Summit, and I'm here and not there. But definitely, you know, they release a whole new iteration of functionality every 3 months. So June, you should expect to see more functionality and some buzz about it before that. You know if there's known issues when you embed multiple story maps in an external web page. Okay, we do this often at USGS, so we can host from our own domain.
I can explain more too if you need be.
Okay, sure. And I'm somewhat technical. I'm a jack of all trades is my job at Esri, so I know I know a little about a lot of our technology. So try me and I'll see. So do you want to go ahead
So
and
the use cases is that you know, often at USGS we like to have our formal banner and footer. So we usually take kind of the iframe and embed it into our own web page that's hosted off of our domain. And just kind of playing around with that, I've tried to embed 2 different story maps, you know, kind of in 2 different sections of the web page. And it seems like the second one to get loaded always gets kind of messed up somehow. Like the extent gets changed for some reason. There's no errors, anything like that, but the extent on the second one generally gets changed for some reason. So I don't know if anybody else has ever tried it, experienced it, whatever.
Well, I'm glad. It's really great to hear that you're already working with these. So I should have asked at the beginning if you had one you want to share, but maybe not if it's not loading.
Well, actually, yeah, we can't because well, we have to approve ours before we get public. We don't have that nice little public button. We actually have to apply for that before that happens. Right. But in local testing, we've tried it. Because as long as you're logged into your account, it actually would let you authenticate and see it in your own test webpage. Magic.
Yeah. No. So this is a good question, and I think there's a number of different things that could be at play that you may have already thought of or not. One is if the content on the other side is the same. I think if you're ingesting it, I mean, it's going to load with the default extent, but I'm not real sure if maybe there's something if you're ingesting the same content and you're interacting with it in one, if somehow it might pass that extent to the other thing in your web experience. But the fact that you're loading it into an iframe kind of means, hopefully, I think the idea there would be that you're kind of separating it from what else is going on the page. So I don't know known issues on that, but I would encourage you to, if you haven't already, call our technical support and see, because I'm sure people have had more than one story map on an external site. Have you already talked to them, or?
Uh-oh. I think she's muted.
Okay. Oh, nice. Whoops, I see the, okay, similar problems with ArcGIS online maps. Okay. So, so I think one thing, and this kind of gets to some of your questions too earlier, Rich, is I think there's, you know, I kind of try not to make things like a commercial for ArcGIS online, because I know that a lot of folks
Hi. Hold on, let me
have access, but there's a lot of things.
No, I've been on calls all morning.
Oh, excuse me? What I was going to say is,
hold on a second. Let me just hold on. Let me just mute people and then unmute you again. Sorry.
Okay.
Okay, you're back.
Okay. What I was going to say is that it might be worth, you know, there's kind of conceptually, there's the StoryMap framework, which is pretty, you know, open. You can download things, and then there's the ArcGIS Online framework, which has a lot of our strong capabilities for geoprocessing and analysis and defining interactions with the map. And maybe it might be good to do a webinar on, and maybe not like soon because I know you've had Esri last month and this month, but on the ArcGIS Online capabilities too, because essentially things you do in ArcGIS Online and save, you can ingest those into these other formats pretty seamlessly. Regarding issues, I see David's question about similar problems with ArcGIS Online maps. I think in that case, I think you're talking about embedding the ArcGIS Online frame of the map in your page and having more than one, and then on the same page, and as you interact with one, it interacts with the other. If that's the question, yep, gotcha. I would call support because there might be some different things at play. I'm happy to, I'll take a note to see if there's any kind of known recommendation on that, but I haven't heard that as a general recommendation of, no, you can't have two of them on the same page. I haven't heard that as a general guidance.
You know, actually that when you were talking about accessing Arc Online or, you know, Esri services, it is worth pointing out that I know that at least in our in the app that we did here, that Zafir did, he was consuming, I think he was consuming regular, well actually, I know that he could consume web map services from, you know, OGC web map services, not necessarily coming from Esri. And I'm not sure what other, I guess you said web feature service as well?
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so, yeah, I mean, pretty much like, I mean, like I had that place where you could put a URL in on here. Let's see, let's go out of here. So this add thing, if you're adding a URL, if you're adding like an OGC service here, it's not going to automatically generate like a map and lay that service on it. It's probably going to go out to that service and retrieve the whatever that endpoint is and load that up. So,
but what about under map though? What was, if you go to map, is it just?
Yep.
I see. Okay.
Yep. So this is going to be. I'm looking at it.
But you could. Oh, I see. So you could. Okay. So you need to create a map with that content using. Okay.
Yeah. So what you would do, but you can. So this kind of gets back to that ArcGIS Online point. In ArcGIS Online, you can share an OGC web service in there. So if you share that as an item is kind of an item in ArcGIS Online for that particular map dialog is the currency. And so if you share if you register your OGC service in ArcGIS Online as an item, you can consume that item in a story map. So what you would do is you'd launch the ArcGIS Online viewer, put your OGC service in there, style it however you want to style it, do whatever pop-ups you want to do, or map notes or analysis, whatever you want to do in that item in ArcGIS Online, and then you can save that as a, save the map and consume it as a map in your story map.
Okay. Any last question? If not, it's 5 minutes to 4 here on the East Coast, and so I think just like to thank you again, Christine, and that was a great presentation. And just for the folks who are still on the line, next month we are going back to basically, well, in January we heard a talk on Google Earth Engine, and you can do similar stuff on the Amazon cloud. So we're hearing a talk on planetary scale data on the cloud, and that's the Amazon cloud from Drew Bollinger. So hope to see you back here next time. And if you have people who you thought might like to see this, again, the recording will be posted to the webpage probably before the end of the day today. So thanks everybody, and thanks Christine again. See you next time.
Thank you, Rich. Alrighty. Bye.
Bye.